deans, directors on their campuses to update the names of programs as terminology in various fields changes over time, and the need to modernize naming conventions becomes clear to faculty and their leadership, their academic leadership on their campuses. The two today are first, University of Maine at Farmington has changed program name from Bachelor of Arts in Visual Arts to Bachelor of Arts in Art and Design. Provost Yardley led the discussion on this at the CAOC level, noting appropriately that visual arts is becoming a relatively outdated term in this broader field, and that there are faculty both at Farmington and elsewhere across the system who have expertise in art and design, and many people on this screen will know that design has a meaning both within the arts and in computer science and in other fields as well. So we have productive conversations with Provost Yardley and the other provosts about potential connections to art and design at Farmington from USM, from UMaine and UMA and elsewhere across the system, and strong support across the board for that name change from visual arts to art and design. Trustees have any questions about that name change? I'd be happy to answer them or enlist Kathy's help in answering them.
And this is purely an information item.
Purely informational. Thank you. And the second one is very much along the same lines, David. USM has changed the name of online nursing Masters of Science to Masters of Science in Nursing, which seems like a simple change. You're moving nursing from one end of the name to the other, but it has significant consequences for naming recognition, both regionally and nationally. The USM put forward a great and clear case for the need to modernize the name for that purpose. Within the MSN in nursing, there are areas of focus within nursing education and within nursing administration and leadership. But the simple change from nursing Masters of Science to MSN, Masters of Science in Nursing, will significantly increase visibility for USM's programs in that area, and that change was enjoyed an uncomplicated pathway through the CAOC discussion and approval by me. I'm happy to answer any questions the trustees may have about either of those name changes. All right, thank you. And I do want to thank the provosts again. They've been very consistent in bringing forward in response to conversations with faculty programs where modernizing of the name is clearly warranted. My next update this morning is with respect to the Tourism, Hospitality, and Outdoor Recreation minor, or THOR minor. I think at the last ASA meeting we had in early May, 6 of our 7 universities had approved that minor. I'm pleased to say that all 7 have approved it. So we now have a minor developed by faculty collaboratively across our system that is active and approved at all 7 universities in the system. In addition to the THOR minor now being everywhere in our system, we are just beginning some conversations with the THOR group. With initial help from Tracy Mishu, but quickly that will move out to other faculty who are involved in this program. We are interested in working with our system-wide academic advising committee, also known as SWAC, which is a great name for a committee if you ask me. System-wide Academic Advising Committee, which was formed just before the big NECHI visit in 2022 to help us do things like figuring out how to conduct multi-university program assessment for programs that are developed and delivered by faculty collaboratively across 2 or 3 or more of our universities. We will be talking to THOR personnel, THOR faculty and others beginning tomorrow with a meeting with Eileen Moran, who's strongly connected to the THOR group, and Emily Zeider, who's also a member of the leadership team that the THOR faculty rely on for the development and the administration of the Thor program. The SWAC group and those two folks will meet tomorrow to begin talking about how we could successfully conduct program assessment across the system for courses taken in the Thor minor. We will ideally, my goal is to bring a proposed approach to the Faculty Governance Council and the individual faculty senates and assemblies, and first and foremost to the Thor faculty themselves, the faculty who are active in this program, in early September, with the goal of piloting an approach to assessment that would give us a model for system-wide assessment of a program delivered across the system, which this would serve to meet obligations we have to NECHI, our own strategic goals and our strategic plan, and also just best practice. We rely on faculty to help us understand what the content of their courses and their programs should be, and they rely on administrators to help administer things like program assessment across universities. And this is a wonderful, I think, a wonderful test case for multi-university program assessment with our Thor colleagues. So that's where we are with that. I will have much more information to share with this group at our August ASA, but I wanted to share that update today, both to pass along the good news of the Thor minors approval across the system, and also to let the trustees know that we are mindful of the need to develop a program for outcomes assessment that works for faculty, works for students, and works for multi-university endeavors like Thor. I'm happy to answer any questions that the trustees may have about that. All right, thank you. Next update is very quick. In consultation with the trustee McMahon, I've made one modification to the work plan for this committee. I'll be sharing two reports at the August ASA meeting instead of one report today and one in August. Be sharing an update at the August meeting on multi-university programs and also an update on transfer. We made that decision because in several respects, those two programs have some overlapping content. I wanted to share both reports at the same time and share a picture of multi-university programs, state of the state within the system, and also a preview of a much broader report on transfer that Heather Ball in my office has been developing over the last several months. We'll be presenting, Heather and I will be presenting on transfer to the full board in September, but this group, these trustees here, will get a preview of where we are on all things transfer at the August ASA meeting, again, alongside an update on multi-university programs. And then Chair McMahon, I'm sailing so far, so I'm just going to try to keep my streak going here. Last update from me before we turn it over to our students and our faculty for today's discussion topic: an enrollment update for everyone on the screen. New student matriculation. Where are we for fall, full-time, first-time students and transfer students? New student matriculations are up 18.6% overall across our system, with each of our universities seeing gains year over year compared to last year. Our most significant gains have been made in-state, a 472 student increase over last year at this same time, and also among online populations. We've had an increase of 515 students over last year at the same time, enrolled in primarily or fully online delivered programs. So that's a subset of all of our students. Online students are growing. Online in toto has grown about 76% over this time last year, with UMPE's competency-based education programs being responsible for a significant percentage of that growth. Transfer enrollment is up 34% compared to last year. About 2/3 of those students are at UMPE, but I also want to note that Farmington has seen significant increases in transfer students from last year to this year. And notably, nearly all transfer growth across the system has been in online programs. We're seeing significant movement of students from the community college system or from out of state or out of country into program delivered fully online across our system. Within our new student matriculation for fall, part of that population, of course, is our direct admit students. Our total matriculated direct admission students for fall 2024 are 378. That's higher than our projection, and that represents 5.6% of the overall fall matriculated population. So 5.6% of our fall class are students who would never have applied to us had we not, or likely would not have been in contact with us or considering us had we not reached out proactively to them and encouraged them to apply, which is a terrific return so far for a program that's just over a year old at this point. Overall enrollment update, undergraduate enrollment headcounts across our system are up in total 2.7% over last year, and credit hours are up 1.8% over last year on the same date. In-state headcounts are up 1.5% overall across the system. Out-of-state undergraduate headcount is up 1% across the system. And I do want to note that Machias is up significantly in its out-of-state enrollment. Machias is up from 78 to 99 enrolled students from the same point last year to this year. And at census last year, Machias was at 99, which means that Machias is looking very strong for its census number relative to the point in the year. There are a number of reasons for that. Much of it, the work done by Kevin Coughlin and his team in UMaine enrollment management over the past year. Undergraduate online is where we've seen the highest headcount, significant growth in students moving into undergraduate online programs at UMaine, at Fort Kent, at UMPI, and elsewhere. We've seen significant gains in this area. On the graduate side, overall graduate enrollment headcount is up 6.5%. Graduate credit hours are up 7.6% year over year. In-state graduate headcount is down slightly, but out-of-state graduate headcount is up 7.3%. Much of that driven by USM, which has seen steady growth over time in a cohort of about 8 existing graduate programs. So this is organic growth, which is the best kind. Roughly a 10 student increase on average across 8 programs over time, with nothing substantively changing other than quality of program being noticed and more students enrolling in those programs, which is a really good kind of growth and a very sustainable kind of growth. Online graduate headcount is up significantly over last year, and like out-of-state headcount, the gain has been driven significantly by graduate level growth at USM as of this point. So we are seeing good results from all of our universities. We're seeing positive enrollment figures, in some cases significantly exceeding enrollment projections established last fall for this fall. The most important thing is that credit hours are up. Vice Chancellor Lowe is here. He'll be happy just to know that credit hours are up. That's the coin of the realm. But enrollment numbers are good, both as measured by matriculation and by headcount. We will continue to monitor throughout the summer, continue to consider the factors such as the FAFSA situation and summer melt. But as of right now, we're on a strong trajectory for fall 2024. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the trustees might have.
Questions for Jeff?
Yeah, I do.
Trustee Cates.
Thank you. What a terrific report. Boy, that is all such terrific, great news. Up. That's wonderful. Could we get that in writing, Jeff? Some sort of a summary. It's just a lot of information altogether. I was trying to make some notes, but If we could get that, that would be terrific.
I'll forward it to you this afternoon. It's coming off of a document that I can easily just send along. So
Thanks a
happy
lot.
to.
Two other questions. One is with the tremendous success of CBE run out of Presque Isle, which I know is contributing to a bunch of these different positive numbers you've just reported. Is there any way to pull out those numbers, because it's such a unique program, it's managed in such a unique way, the credit hours are it's not traditional credit hours. Is there any way to pull those numbers out of these various categories so we can see sort of non-CBE numbers standing alone? Could we do that?
Yes.
Great. And one other, oh yeah. You've talked at some length about, or regularly hear about, how much of this increase is due to online education. I take it whether it's CBE or whether it's courses offered directly by one of our universities. Is there any way to quantify how this is changing, how many bodies are showing up on campus each semester as we begin, particularly on another committee on which I sit, we talk about the future of facilities and the demand for facilities going forward. Can we tell whether we've got the same number of students showing up this coming year or as we did last year, or whether that number is down despite the increase in credit hours? And how hard is that to do?
It's not hard to do at all. It's easier to do after the end of add drop when we know who's physically with us as a predominantly in-person or residential student versus predominantly online student. But we have that in data. We can develop that data for sure.
Okay. Is there any way of getting it for this past academic year, so that once we get the numbers for the next academic year, we're going to be able to see the trends there?
Yes, we track residency everywhere, so we can certainly do that.
That'd be really helpful. Thanks, but just really positive news. Congratulations to everybody.
Counselor, go ahead.
What we'll also do is send along some information on the program that we started last summer to help people complete their degrees that may have stopped out. And we'll try to give you a report on that as well. I believe that's part of the success on the online increases amongst that population.
Barbara, go ahead.
Echoing Roger's comments for sure. I presume when you say you'll send it out, you mean to all of us. And I definitely would like to see it broken down by campus. And I'm wondering as well about the impact of the Presque Isle program, and how, in other words, I presume we would see differing progress toward online and on-campus use of facilities by campus. And that would help target discussion and ongoing issues from time to time in either committee. So thank you.
Jeff, do you want to respond?
Barbara, I would say yes. When we're tracking what you have in mind across committees, I mean, there's regular communication across ASA and FFT, for instance, on subjects like this. I would say that while the growth at UMPI has been phenomenal and we have nothing but positive things to say about it, we also have across our provosts and presidents, because of goals within the strategic plan, a concerted effort to move more programs, including existing programs that are delivered face-to-face, online as faculty become prepared and ready to do that. We have an increasing growth of modality conversions from face-to-face to online, in some cases with faculty delivering both versions of that program so that they can reach as many students as possible. And that's part of the gains that we're seeing.
Right, and tracking that progress is important for all of us to be aware of. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions of Jeff?
Trustee McMahon, I want to apologize for stopping in late and not being able to take roll call. I was in the previous meeting.
Do you want to take roll call now, or do you want to do it when we go into executive session?
I can take it now.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Trustee McMahon,
Yes,
trustee Kane,
Yes.
trustee Alexander,
Yes.
trustee Martin.
Yes.
I think that's everyone on the committee. Thank you.
thank you. So the next item on the agenda is the student and the faculty discussion, with the students going first. Jeff, do you want to tee this up in any way?
I'm just pleased to say that for the second meeting in a row, we had strong agreement among the student representatives and the faculty representatives about the wisdom of sharing an update on the same subject. So as trustees will recall, at our May meeting, the students and faculty spoke about academic advising. And after meeting with them in Fort Kent for the last board meeting, students and faculty agreed that discussing course evaluations would be an excellent choice of a joint topic for today. So that's where we are. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Trustee McMahon.
Okay, so from the trustees, let's go. Who's doing the presentation for us today?
Good morning, trustees. Student rep Alec Brooks from UMPI. I'll be leading the presentation today. Can I share my screen?
Absolutely.
Hmm. Okay, so as you know, we chose course evaluations as a topic for discussion today. When we chatted amongst as a group about this topic, there was a lot of interesting things that came up in discussion. So one thing that we came across was three things that stood out. Most universities had the same when it came with time frame, questions, and feedback. So time frame, a lot of the course evaluations are given right at the end of the school year. So a lot of students who are enrolled in classes also have work to get done, finals to prepare for. It makes it for a very difficult time frame for them to get evaluations in from start to finish. So a lot of universities and a lot of us reps agreed that the time frame of when those are given makes it difficult for students to place their feedback and give those evaluations. The questions, I mean, the questions are pretty much the same throughout the universities. I personally think that the questions that are asked during course evaluations are good. They're there. And then with the feedback, there tends to be students have limited knowledge of what course evaluations do and what impact it plays to faculty. With that being said, signed versus unsigned contract, signed versus unsigned evaluations would be one example of that, where they don't get they don't know what happens with the course evaluation, which in turn makes it difficult for them as far as like what motivates them to do the course evaluation. So I think that like that's another area that we agreed upon as a group. Going into the next slide, is Grace on this call?
I'm here.
Okay.
All right, everyone. My name is Grace Hills. For those who don't know me, I am the new student rep for UMA. On this next slide, you'll see some student feedback that we received from the 3 universities from UMA, UMPI, and USM. A lot of student feedback had to do with misunderstandings, as previously discussed. They didn't understand the differences between signed and unsigned evaluations. There was a lack of awareness of how evaluations actually make a difference at the university level and the university main system level. And I did hear a lot from my students in particular that there's possible fear of completing the evaluations. One thing that was mentioned to me is that even if they sign a course for that semester, they might have to take the same teacher again for like a next semester or the next year. I know in my program that's very specific because we do take the same teacher multiple times. There was a lot of questions about like, why did the course evaluations not have particular questions to that course? For example, they tend to be more basic. They're not like, how did your vet tech course like answer like to questions about like what like the anatomy would be, or like, you know, like for like physiology. They seem to be pretty basic and generic for course after course. At least that's how it was at my university as well. And the timing, again, that was something that was brought up multiple times at my campus and for other campuses. The timing seems to be like very complicated. We're trying to finish up finals, and we also don't know what is going to be at the end of the class, like the way that they do their final, or like that last week. I think students feel that they can't just share when they haven't finished the class. And then lastly, students may be unaware that student responses to evaluations may not be shared beyond the professor until they undergo peer-reviewed and tenure review. Students, I will say that before I actually had the discussion for Kent, is that they don't understand that it stays within the teacher unless it's time for peer review and tenure review. A lot of us thought previously that they would go to, let's say, their academic like coordinator, or it would go to the different degree coordinators. We were unaware that the teacher could decide what comments that they could use. And I think that's very important for students to be informed of. We can go on to the next slide, Alec. So the big takeaway from this discussion is that we learned that there's limited of information that's being brought out to students, and that's across all of the universities, across the UMS system. And what are some possible solutions? Well, some things that we thought was that maybe we could try to, like the student reps could try to hand out information to students before the semester starts, or maybe even the academic advisors could do that. We could have things at a system level come out to all of our students, maybe something in my campus. But lastly, we wanted to ask all of you guys, what are your thoughts on this takeaway and discussion?
Thank you very much, Alex and Grace. Questions? Comments? Either from the students or from the faculty reps? Tyler?
Thank you, Trustee McMahon. For those who I haven't met, Tyler Davis, the student rep from Maine Law. So just to kind of build on what Alec and Grace touched on, in kind of being solutions oriented, a few things that have come to mind of kind of the Maine Law student body really relate to accessibility and impact of the course evaluations. Alex sort of described the typical timing in which course evaluations are circulated are at a very busy time of the semester, frequently in the final weeks or during finals. And, you know, one solution to that would be to, you know, circulate the evaluations earlier and leave them open for longer, so that students can provide feedback as it is convenient, but also if it's administratively possible, updating course evaluations, so it's not sort of just a one-time submission. You know, if we're soliciting thoughtful feedback, I think it's important to provide the ability for students to actually really contemplate what evaluations they're providing. As far as impact, this is, very sort of class dependent, but it's helpful to understand how these evaluations are making their way into affecting the curriculum and course material. Professors will sometimes articulate, how student feedback has influenced their class structure or the timing or materials that they're providing, and that has been very meaningful to students in the past to understand that their feedback is having an effect. So overall, definitely an important feature for students. The evaluation process allows for kind of regular feedback, and it is appreciated, and appreciate the opportunity to kind of present to the group here and be heard. So thank you.
Thank you, Tyler. Other comments, questions? Barbara?
Could I ask the students, who communicates to you about the opportunity to provide the evaluation? Who is the sender of the form or opportunity that you're receiving?
Yeah, so a lot
ahead,
of
Alec.
a lot of times it's automated sended. So there's no it doesn't directly come from an individual, or it's not relayed from an individual. It is automated.
So it looks like it's coming from the university system, or it's not coming from the faculty, it's himself or herself. Is that correct?
Right, or the university, whatever application the university uses.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, comments? Jeff, you have any comments to make at this time?
I do, but President Rice has his hand up.
Oh, sorry, it's on the other screen. Sorry, Ray. Go ahead.
Oh, perfectly fine. I was just going to build on Alec's answer, which is correct. Like, for instance, at my institution, Academic Affairs sends out that information. So it would appear, Trustee Alexander, that is coming from the university. Faculty, though, do have the ability to notify their own students. And several of the faculty I know will do that and say, please fill out your evaluations, which will be available next week. So there are venues for faculty to engage directly with batches of their students through Brightspace, for instance, to notify them all, because those evaluation notifications also come through Brightspace. So that's one of the nice things about having a unified learning platform. And if anything, we should make that more robust in that regard. It helps that dissemination, but messaging can always be clearer.
Thanks, Ray.
Trustee McMahon, if I could just build on that quickly from the Maine Law perspective. We do have faculty kind of during the course evaluation period also in class, just kind of mention it to the class at the beginning, as the attendance sheet is going around or something, to take 5 minutes and complete the course evaluation for those so inclined. So that in-person messaging has been really effective as well.
Thank you. Emily?
Thank you so much. This is a really great conversation, and I appreciate the presentation. I have a very weird memory of feeling nervous during class evaluation time as a student from a long time ago, when you're like, but are they going to see this? And what if I say something negative? And I think there's an opportunity, which was touched on in the presentation, to educate students about how these evaluations are used, and that it's okay to sign an evaluation, right? That it's not going to be a retaliation situation, and that faculty take these very seriously. And there's probably an opportunity, sort of from a writ large perspective, through our student leaders, to educate their peers, and also to remind faculty lovingly that it's an opportunity for them also to build trust with their students, because they want the feedback. But I am sympathetic, because I do have a big memory of being nervous about signing an evaluation and understanding what that meant. And I'm very sympathetic. And but I think I love that the students are so engaged in coming up with a way to make these more meaningful. So thank you.
Adam?
Thank you, Trustee McMahon, and thank you to the students and faculty for this presentation. It's a really important one. I would want to offer that we are in bargaining right now, and so I don't know, Jeff, or if anyone else has expertise on how these issues are bargained. But just for a couple of these things, like timing, I believe is bargained. And one of the conundrums, just based upon the first recommendation, is that as Tyler pointed out, it's helpful to have a longer duration. One of the things that we've done at USM to respond to lower response rates is to ask faculty to conduct course evaluations, much like they used when we used paper evaluations, because we are seeing really low response rates, and that can prove problematic. The second thing that I would want to point out is we do need to do a better job through orientation, educating students about different venues and ways to respond. So course evaluations are primarily developmental. And so when we do evaluate course evaluations through the tenure and promotion process, at USM, we use course evaluations to reflect not just an overall rating of the course, but the way in which their subjective feedback reflects our academic values, and particularly our service promise, which demands respect and care and responsiveness, which are more subjective features that students can really respond to effectively. Another way we get beyond question 13, and I give a talk to new faculty about this, and question 13 is an overall instructor rating, is to utilize course evaluations developmentally. And so through the tenure and promotion process, faculty often describe the way they respond to student feedback to improve their teaching. And that's why it goes into that personnel process. But in terms of communicating with students, we need to make clear to them that we have EO and Title IX processes, which are very important for them to know about. Course evaluations are another form of giving student feedback. And in the bargaining process, it would be wonderful if unsigned comments could be included in a representative way, just because, as Grace said, there are a lot of programs like in the arts, for example, or engineering, where there is an expectation that a student will have a faculty member repeatedly over the 4 to 6 years that they attend. And so that puts them in a vulnerable place. As Emily said, Trustee Kane said about returning feedback. So that would be an area that we could hopefully visit, perhaps through the bargaining process, if AFM and the faculty would be amenable to that. And so, but this is a really important issue. And then finally, with the question about the delay in time that these reports reach the faculty, students should and need to be aware that if there is a problem, that they have the ability to go to the instructor and the chair and the dean immediately to address a problem in the classroom. And at USM, the administration always gives them the option to communicate those things privately. I think a frustration for students is that this becomes immediately a personnel issue. And so they often don't see the impact that their feedback provides, but we do that privately. And hopefully to good effect. So thank you for raising this important issue.
Thank you, Adam. John?
Thank you, Trustee McMahon. I won't repeat a lot of what Adam just said, although I completely agree on the collective bargaining aspects of the signing that students must do for their comments to be shared, and on the timing. We're restricted, but the 2-week window at the end there for the timing when we can give out the student evaluations. I will add, since University of Maine wasn't on that list, there's been a lot of work with faculty and students here at the University of Maine, University of Maine at Machias. Our University Teaching Council and our Academic Affairs Committee of the Faculty Senate have worked very strongly with our Office of Institutional Research and Assessment, and we've modified the language in the welcoming message for the evaluations, really to stress to students the importance and the purpose of SCTs and be more transparent about the overall process. Students at the time of evaluation, students will get the initial invitation, they'll get 2 reminders via email. Faculty will get several reminders as well. We also, like Ray was talking about, link to the student evaluations in the pop-up of the Bright Brightspace Shell. And also it's part of their to-do list in Navigate. And so there's many ways that we're addressing this, and so we've bumped up the online somewhat. It's still lower than what used to be with in-person, the paper copies, but we're about mid-40s now, which is quite an improvement from where it was historically. So a lot of work is done here, but what I really like to see is how collaborative it's been. Like USM, we try to really encourage faculty to, when you do overall teaching evaluation of effectiveness of their teaching, is the SATs are very important, but there's so many other areas to be able to evaluate as well that Adam touched on that we really support here a lot through our Center for Innovation in Teaching and Learning. So I just wanted to share that. Thanks.
Thanks, John. Jeff, do you want to make any comments before we move to the faculty presentation?
Just one, David, while I certainly respect all the comments regarding our collective bargaining arrangements, it would be a profound lack of prudence on my part to respond to them in one direction or the other while we are actively engaged in bargaining. So how's that, David, for a very politic non-answer to Provost Tuchinski and Provost Vollin's insightful and thoughtful comments about student evaluations of teaching?
Thank you, Jeff. Any other comments on the student presentation? If not, let us move to the faculty presentation. I'm not sure who's taking the lead on that.
Well, since bargaining was brought up, I don't mind starting. I'm actually the lead negotiator for AFM. Obviously, I can't talk about what's happening in bargaining, but I can just talk philosophically about a couple different things. So one is the signed versus unsigned comments. And so the idea behind having unsigned comments being at the discretion of the faculty member for inclusion in any review is because it's kind of in the realm of due process that you should be able to know who your quote unquote accuser is. I hesitate to use that name, but if students are saying things that happened in the classroom and it's a student who did not attend, then the faculty member should be able to allow that context. I will tell you anecdotally that the majority of faculty that I know include their unsigned comments. I know I do, but that's just me. Even when they're like not maybe as flowery as I would like them to be. The other thing about timing, it's difficult because I heard two things from the students, and I definitely understand both. That it's the end of the semester and they're busy, but then it's also, well, it's not before the final and they don't know what the final is going to be like, right? So lots of faculty do informal student feedback where they allow during Brightspace. There's lots of different options for them to do that. So that would be kind of my AFM hat that I'll now take off and just talk generally as a faculty rep. I will say participation rates are the biggest concern. When we went from, I'm old enough to know when we did it on paper, Emily. So when we went from paper to electronic, a lot of participation rates really went down. I know a lot of faculty try to still have classroom time and they leave the room and say, can everyone get out their phone and fill it out, just like they would have done on paper. Also having a discussion in the classroom. I agree about what this means, where it goes, why it's important. One of the things I say to students is to try to encourage them to participate is say, I have tried to give you useful, constructive feedback all semester so that you can improve. And I'm now asking you to do that for me, right? And it is useful. So I think framing it as a constructive feedback and not like telling on someone is really important. The last thing I would say is that the faculty can add questions. So some students may experience some extra questions. I know a lot of programs that are accredited are required to get student feedback on certain items in their curriculum. I know, for example, my program requires service learning. And so when it's a service learning class, they are asked certain questions about service learning. And then finally, we all have to realize this is ordinal data. And there's a big concern that people looking at these numbers beyond faculty may not understand the value or the lack of value of ordinal data. And to put my AFM hat back on a minute, there is a committee in our contract of both administration and faculty that are supposed to study the use of student evaluations and how it could be improved. That committee has never met, as far as I know. But in the current bargaining, we are talking about, let's kind of do that. So we'll see where that goes. So that's what I have to say. I could answer any other questions, especially if people had questions about our current contract and what the language is around that. But I know we've got Clyde and who else did I see on here? Oh, there's Joe, and I also saw Patrick. So go ahead, Joe.
Great, thanks. So I think we've covered a lot of evaluations as they stand to date. I just want to reiterate that a good portion of the faculty I know, folks I deal with on a regular basis, will typically offer opportunities to evaluate the course during the semester, because the other issue that has been hinted at is that the faculty don't see these evaluations until the course is over. And so those students that were generous enough to evaluate the course don't benefit from any modifications or adaptations that resulted from that during the semester. And so recognizing that, I know some of us may recall this idea of a 1-minute paper where you ask 3 questions. So simple things like, what have you liked about the course so far? What don't you like? And then the third one, anything you want to say or ask. And these are anonymous pieces of paper. I've used this technique in the past. And then we can adapt accordingly. And then, so the students in that class, in that semester, are able to benefit from that evaluation / adaptation then and there, right? The other thing is that, I think the other part of evaluation that really, I don't know how you would keep track of this, but the constant mentoring, the engagement with students, is this clear, reaching out to students, that's just part of the job. And I think that even though we can't write that down on a piece of paper, we really should recognize that certainly, again, anybody that I deal with on a regular basis is doing that. And so course evaluation goes well beyond things that we can categorize or fill in a bubble on or write a comment to. It's part of the mentoring and adaptation that we all engage in on a daily basis. That's really all I have to add.
Thanks, Joe. Clyde, go ahead.
Hi, sorry, I do have a snoring dog in the background. My apologies for that. I just had a couple of things to add. Taking on from what Joe had said about the broader role that faculty play in advising, I really feel strongly that that should be assessed somewhere, in that it is a very important part of what we do. And I know we talk about assessment, advising in a different meeting, but I think it's a very, very key thing that we can do to support our students kind of in terms of their longer term development. So I wanted to raise that. Lisa mentioned that she remembered when they were using paper forms. My department ended paper forms at COVID because we really felt that we got best response rates. You would get every student would complete the returns. So a lot of faculty do set aside class time now and encourage students to get out their phones and their laptops and their tablets and complete their assessments. And I think it's very important because I've been on peer committees since I've been at my university. And when you're assessing fellow faculty and they have a response of 3 students out of 25, there's really not much you can do with that data. And that data is probably skewed to start with, because the 3 students might be the 3 biggest fans of that faculty member, or they might be the 3 that were really, really upset. So to be able to use the data, it needs to be more representative of the actual class. which comes to kind of when you open and close the teaching evaluations. And I don't know if it's true for all campuses, but my understanding is that I have control over that. So I open it towards the end of the semester and then I close it again. I don't know if I'm supposed to be doing that or not doing that. But it would be, I think, maybe helpful for students to know that there's like this 2-week period up to the end of finals where it's open. And I think it should be open until finals are completed, because if the final is, different and students don't think it's fair assessment of what they've done during the semester, I think that should be open to them. So, and then coming back to a point that a couple of people have raised, I know that when I did some MBA classes through USM, and this is graduate students who are better informed, there was still a lot of fear about completing evaluations. We had one instructor who was an adjunct and didn't do a particularly good job, and nobody really wanted to put down any comments because they were like scared that that it could be misused. So I think having clearer knowledge that the information is not going to be available to the faculty member until the grades are submitted and the results are closed would be very helpful, and I think we'd get more honest responses if that process was kind of continued. I don't want to hog the stage, and I'm going to switch off now. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Mike. Patrick.
Hi, it's great to see everyone. Happy summer. So I was just going to share a bit about my experience in terms of UMA, and then just some of my thoughts in terms of what I've heard come up today. So I think it was Provost Volin who mentioned this, which I really appreciate, is that evaluations are part of a larger constellation of feedback. So in terms of my own personal tenure track at UMA, not only does my peer committee sort of evaluate me on my evaluations, but during my annual reappointments, there's a discussion. I don't want to call it a defense, but a discussion of sort of the evolution of my teaching. And we also do peer reviews of teaching that are two-way. So I have senior faculty who review some of my courses, lectures, and so forth. And I actually, as a junior faculty, do that for my senior faculty. So that makes it kind of a two-way process. And in terms of the tenure track, it kind of demonstrates our value in terms of we have things to offer to our senior colleagues. Something that I find that has come up a lot with faculty is around the validity of course evaluations. And that's really about, do they measure what they want to measure? And some of the research we've seen is people like myself, straight white men tend to do better on course evaluations. So they tend to be biased against difficult courses. They tend to be biased against women, as well as people of color and LGBTQA individuals. So that's something to keep in mind. In terms of like the faculty side, looking at other faculty, these can be incredibly helpful for us in terms of kind of identifying red flags with faculty. So sometimes with adjuncts, the structure of their contract is different and they're reviewed in much different intervals. So sometimes that helps faculty take action if there's a faculty member who has tons of really bad reviews, kind of helps us do something in those situations. And then lastly, I just want to touch on some of the comments I heard today. I think timing has come up, and that's, I think, going to be controversial. So this gets back to validity for me, but we want to divorce like emotions from course evaluations. Like they're really supposed to be about teaching. So for a lot of us, it raises the question, if we're waiting until a student finds out if they failed or not, and if they're going to leave a negative evaluation if they fail, does that kind of undermine the validity of course evaluations? In terms of science comments, my process in our peer group is we just present everything and we leave it to the trustees and faculty to decide. But I think there's some kind of interesting discussions you can have back and forth about whether or not to include signed comments. I really appreciated Trustee Kane's point about anxiety. Faculty actually have a lot of anxiety too about looking at course evaluations. Like I often joke with my colleagues that, like, okay, we're going to pour a bottle of bourbon into a coffee mug before we look at course evaluations, because sometimes we get really hurtful anonymous comments, and that to me raises some questions about accountability and again the validity. And then just the last point I'll mention in terms of more broad issues is most campus, I'm sure all campuses within the UMaine system have a student handbook. So there are processes students can leverage above and beyond student evaluations if they have a more significant grievance with a faculty member. And that, at least at UMA, that first involves engaging a chair or coordinator, and then it can escalate to the dean or dean of students, to the provost, and so forth. So that's sort of my piece. I just want to thank you again for the time.
Thanks, Patrick. Other comment? Barbara, go ahead.
I didn't know if you wanted to make sure that all the faculty here had opportunity for comments, or whether you wanted any trustee reaction. The timing of that, I'll leave to you, David.
Go ahead, Barbara.
Okay. I am very interested in the various comments and discussions of this, and I was impressed with Professor Cheeks beginning to talk about the academic research about customer complaints and what you do with them, and what the research would tell you about their value. I'm familiar with this issue from the point of view of regulated public utilities. There is a connection here. Regulated public utilities have a monopoly, and we're not going to get rid of them because we've had some bad complaints. But the research would tell you that complaints can represent, quote, the tip of the iceberg, that they do raise red flags. And the important thing about the results of getting complaints is, what do you do with them once you get them? And the kind of analysis that needs to be done is not just, in my opinion, the faculty person evaluating them, which I completely understand you would want to do, but how are they used from the perspective of evaluating good professors from those who aren't so good? And what role does the interior faculty process have in handling that matter? In the utility world, consumer advocates ask for a root cause analysis of customer complaints. In other words, it's not just counting up how many there are and deciding whether they're representative or not. It's looking at them to find more of them, to let you find more instances of adverse impact or failure or non-compliance or bad teaching by focusing on the ones that did come in and doing a deep dive. Is this something that is a pattern or practice? Is this something that actually reflects lack of proper teaching methodology? And taking that, whether it's signed or not, as evidence to be used for evaluation is something that I think is missing here, and would like to hear more about as to how this happens. I've heard anecdotal reaction to that. Oh, I do this. Oh, I do that. But is this the norm? Is this an expectation in the process? If you did that and made it clear to students that you are doing that and that this has actual impact, you'd probably find more students willing to complete the process. Thank you very much.
Yeah, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I do, David. Thank you. And Barbara, please be assured there's a tremendous amount of systematic response to the way faculty are evaluating their teaching, including a pattern of negative comments, should that pattern appear, connected to one instructor over time. I say this each year as we're looking at tenure applications coming forward. The most demanding level of review is by the peers in the department, by the peer group, because they have a strong vested interest in working or not working with someone for the next 10 or 20 or 30 years. And there tends to be a significant amount of expertise applied by the peers in helping colleagues improve their teaching over time. It doesn't happen overnight, and I think faculty are very aware of that. But the peers are a strong and first level resource. Beyond that, of course, you have chairs or directors, and depending on your university structure, dean, provost, president. There's a level of review by each of those groups throughout the pre-tenure period for faculty evaluation, and a structured level of review as faculty are going up for tenure, and then a post-tenure process that we have as well established by contract at each of our universities that very much is focused on improvement across the board, and teaching is certainly a part of that. One more thing I'll say before giving the floor to Lisa. One of the students, I believe it was either Alec or Grace early on, made mention of comments and how faculty use negative comments from evaluations. I do want to say for the students' edification that faculty, certainly in tenure applications, overwhelmingly faculty include negative as well as positive comments. They do so because it shows an arc of improvement in their teaching over time, and they can demonstrate it through those comments in addition to the quantitative, the ordinal data that Lisa was referring to that comes out of evaluations as well. It's very uncommon to see the cherry picking of positive comments only going into a tenure application, because it's disingenuous and it doesn't show a clear trend line of improvement over time, which is what faculty, out of their own professional aspirations, almost always want to show and see for themselves and demonstrate to their peers and others, in addition to becoming better teachers for their students, as Adam noted earlier. So there's a systematic approach to this, led by faculty and conducted at all of our universities with strong administrative support going all the way up to the level of the president at each university. And all of what has been discussed today is in some way codified in our contracts with our faculty.
Thank you. Lisa.
Yes, thanks, Jeff. I'll reiterate a lot of what you said. And I did want to say, I spoke about my own personal experience, but I am co-chair of our peer evaluation committee. So I've seen lots of people's evaluations, and there's some serious discussions that go on, and there's recommendations at the peer level, at the dean level, at the provost president level of, well, we're seeing a trend here. I think we have to take everything that we receive with students with some contextual grain of salt. With comments, I find it's often bimodal. They either love you or they really don't. They have to be motivated one way or the other to actually go beyond, checking off the boxes or the numerical data to actually write a comment. I can remember, it wasn't actually at UMPE, it was where I taught previously in Canada. I was reading my student comments, and one said, Professor Leduc is the best professor I've ever had. She should teach seminars on the weekend to teach other professors how to teach. And then I turned the page and the next one was Professor Leduc should be fired. Right? And it was the same class. So I think we often look for trends or something very specific, like the PowerPoints are too much or the tests don't seem related to the book. And then there's opportunities for faculty members. Every campus, I believe, has a Center for Teaching and Learning, especially faculty members using a lot of online or Brightspace. They can have a private, like as in it doesn't go into their personnel file, but they can have an instructional designer come in, look at their class online or sit on their class and give them some feedback that they may use. And those letters that they get in review are reviewed the next time they're reviewed. And it's like, well, have you improved? We're definitely looking for improvement. So I just don't want anyone to go away from this discussion to think, yeah, we don't really pay attention to that stuff that comes in. It's definitely, but we do have to take it in context, and we have to encourage students to participate, right? That the more data we have, the better. There is actually a floor in those campuses, I believe it's almost everybody that uses Blue, that if your response rate is too low, you won't even get a report based on the percentage of the students enrolled. And I see some of those. I mean, obviously we're a small campus with some small classes. But thanks, Jeff, for highlighting how that happens.
Joe.
Great. I want to sort of build on that a little bit. And I also want to remind folks that teaching is a dynamic process. So what worked for me 15 years ago doesn't work today. The preparedness of students also fluctuates as we go through each cohort of students. And so we're constantly, if you're on top of this, you're constantly trying to anticipate the common strengths and weaknesses of each cohort of students, as well as the latest in technologies and techniques. And so certainly at USM, and I know everywhere else, in fact, all of the faculty reps here, we've talked about teaching style and technique just off the cuff. But faculty are also engaged in professional development as it relates to teaching, not just in their field in doing research, but just in how to become a better instructor overall, as well as the discussions we've already had about advising and mentorship and those sorts of things. And that'll forever be dynamic. We'll never come up with an approach to teaching that works today that will work tomorrow and forevermore. So I think recognizing that faculty are constantly trying to stay ahead of whatever the latest and greatest is in terms of teaching and adapt to the current cohort of students is important for this group, and certainly important for the evaluation process overall. People who show that they are continually engaged in professional development of instruction I think that's a really important evaluation tool in and of itself. That's all I had to say. I wanted to add to that.
Thanks. Barbara.
So I'm reacting to what a number of students who started off this discussion were saying is, we don't know what happens to this information we're giving you. We don't understand where it is used. We think that if we don't sign it, it's not being used. We didn't know that it doesn't really impact the immediate decisions about this professor, that peer review and tenure track process, which is, something that most students simply don't understand or have a role in. Those are the things they don't know about. So if you want to encourage people to complain, comment, or provide positive or negative feedback, they need to know how it's being used. And that's the breakdown here that I detect from the student perspective versus the faculty descriptions of all these wonderful things that are occurring in the back room somewhere. So that was the reason for my comment. Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara. Other questions? Patrick, go ahead.
Yeah, just one quick comment that came to mind is, academia is so much different than other industries. I love the analogy of, customer satisfaction. And if I go to a restaurant and get a bad meal, I complain. But part of the process of higher education, unfortunately, for better or worse, sometimes involves making the student demographic unhappy. At the Fort Kent BOT meeting, you saw like the rigor that goes into the nursing program there. And that, is all to ensure that you get the best quality graduate who goes into the workforce. And sometimes that's an arduous and difficult process. And I think that sometimes emotions can get tied up in that. And even if someone not necessarily has a negative experience, but a hard experience, it's different from different industries where someone might compare that to sort of bad customer service. So I just wanted to kind of share that because I think it's on the mind of a lot of faculty.
Thanks, Patrick. Jeff, do you have any concluding remarks on this section?
Just responding to all the comments, thanking the students and faculty for their candid sharing of experiences today. And I have a lengthy list of notes here and thoughts to take back to our next meeting with the provost. And I appreciate their feedback during this discussion as well. It's been very helpful.
I would reiterate that, and I thank everybody for their preparedness and their presentations and participation today. The next item on the agenda is an executive session, and I would welcome a motion for the Board of Trustees meeting to go into executive section under the provisions of 1 MRSA Section 4056A to discuss the evaluation of personnel and the consideration and discussion of appointments, evaluations, employment, and duties. Could I have a motion? Moved by trustee Alexander. Could I have a second?
Second.
Second by trustee Kane. Would the clerk take the roll, please?
Yes, trustee McMahon,
Yes.
trustee Kane,
Yes.
trustee Alexander,
Yes.
trustee Martin. I see her on here. I think she stepped into another meeting. The motion carries.
Thank you. We're moving to an executive room. Thank everybody else.